Okay, so now that we have our ball and our paddle set up, the next thing we want to do is make it so that we can actually control when we start playing the game. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to first of all reset our paddle so it's kind of roughly in the center, and we're going to move our ball into roughly a starting position like that. And what we want to do is give our players the ability to start the game. So for example, what we're going to do is set it so that when the player hits the space bar, it launches the ball and starts it moving. So to do that, obviously then in our ball controller script, we don't want it to automatically start firing the ball. What we want to do is hit / just like that. And what we're going to do is create a new variable here that will control whether the ball is currently activated within the game. So we're going to create a new public bool called ball active, and what we'll do is set this to activate, and that'll be what we use to start the ball moving in the game. So what we're also going to need to do is set it so that our ball, when it's not active, stays above the paddle. So say for example, what we're wanting to do is if our player starts the game, they might want to start the ball firing at any of these particular bricks in the world. So what we can do is then create a new position that is slightly above the paddle, and that's where the ball will move to whenever the game is not currently active and that we're waiting for the player to fire off the ball. So what we'll do is we have our ball active bool, and we can check and say if our ball active is not true, and the way we check if something is not true is we put an exclamation mark in front of it. So we're saying if ball active is false, which is our bool value up here, and when you create a bool value, by default it's set to be false, so in our inspector it'll start off as false. So if our ball active is false, then our velocity of a rigid body shouldn't be doing anything. So we'll say our rigid body dot velocity is equal to vector 2 dot 0. So that makes sure that our ball won't go flying off and bouncing around all over the place when our player hasn't started the game yet. And then we want to set the position of the object, so our transform dot position. We're going to want to set that to a particular point in space. So what we're going to need to do is create a reference to a transform position, which will be a public transform that we'll call our start point. And what we're going to say is if the game isn't currently active and our ball is just kind of sitting there doing nothing, it should be set to this point, which will be kind of just above our paddle. So we're going to say start point dot position. So our transform position is equal to start point dot position. So I'm just going to save this and we'll go back into the game, and we'll set that up now so that it's in place within our game. So we just wait for it to compile for a second, and then what we're going to do is go to our paddle here. We're going to create a child object, so we're going to create empty while the paddle is selected, and we're going to call this the ball start point. And if we go back to our ball, we're going to scroll down and we have the slot here for the start point, and we're going to click and drag that into there. So now we should be able to see when we hit play here, our ball won't start moving around. Oh, we've lost the ball. Where is it gone? It's at -4. Oh, it's gone inside the paddle. That's why. Did I click and drag the... Oh, I never moved the start point up. That was our problem. Of course. We actually need to drag the start point up above the paddle. There we go. For some reason I just imagined that I had done that. So if we hit play this time, now we have the ball is just above the paddle where it should be. But if we move the paddle to the left and right, now the ball is kind of just above it, so we can use it to control where we're going to start our game from. Okay, so if we've got that set up, then we need a way of activating the ball back into the game. And to do that, we're going to use a game manager script, much like we used in the previous project. But our game manager needs to be able to call something on our ball controller to be able to activate the game. So at the bottom down here, we're going to create a new script that we're going to call public void activate ball. I don't know why every time I type ball I type a capital A. I don't know why that is, but anyway, so we're saying our activate ball little function down here will basically check, or it'll basically set our ball active to now be true. So that means our ball is not going to be held in place at the transform position, and it's not going to have the velocity set to be 0. So we can make sure that that's true now, and also we can start it moving by saying the rigid body dot velocity is equal to, just as we did up here, we're going to take the new vector 2 and set it to be the vertical speed and start moving at the vertical speed. So perfect, that's exactly what we wanted to do, and we can just save that. But of course at the moment we have no way of calling that. So what we need to do is go ahead and create the game manager script that we just talked about. So we're going to create a new C# script that we're going to call the game manager, and we'll open that up in MonoDevelop. And basically all we're going to have at the moment in our game manager is just an if statement that checks if our player has pressed the spacebar. So we're going to say if input.getKeyDown, and the key code that we're looking for is the space button. So keycode.space. So if the player presses the key code for space, then what we're going to do is on the ball controller script, we're going to call the activate ball function. So if we're going to be doing some stuff with our ball controller, we know there's only one ball controller in the game, so we can do like we did in the previous project again, and we can have a reference here to the ball controller that we will call the ball, and then in our start function we can say, okay, the ball is equal to find object of type ball controller. So find the ball controller within the scene and apply it to our current the ball variable here. So then when we press the space button down, what we can say is, okay, on the ball object we want to run the function activate ball. So we can save that and we can pop back into the game. And of course now we need to create an object for the game manager to be attached to within our world. So we'll wait for that to compile for a second. Then we'll go over here and create a new empty game object, and we'll call this game manager. Oh, manager, didn't spell that very well. Game manager, and we're going to apply that script to it like that. And of course it has the slot for the ball here. I should actually, as I look at that, I should set that to be a private variable, because we're not going to be worrying about setting that at all. It's going to be automatically set. So we'll just save that and go back in here, and there we go, it disappears from our game manager. And now if we hit play, what we can do, we can move back and forth with the ball, and now if we hit space, it'll start the game running. Of course at the moment also if we hit space, it makes the ball apply that movement force because we're calling the activate script. So we're going to disable that as we go a little bit further in it. But for the moment, that's all we needed to do. So our game manager now controls launching our ball. Actually, now that I think about it, let's just quickly fix that while we can. So we're going to add an extra bool variable into our game manager. We're going to create a public bool, and we're going to call it game active. And basically by default our game will not be active, and so what we're going to add in here is another element to this key code space check. After we have the closing bracket for the key code space, we're going to add in here, we're going to say, we're going to put 2 ampersands in, and that means and, basically. So what we're saying is when you're doing any kind of check within Unity, these little 2 symbols like this means and. So what we're saying is if the key code space is pressed and our game active is not true. So if game active is not true and we press down the space bar, then it'll call the activate ball script and it'll set game active equals true. So that means it'll only activate this little function once, and then we won't be able to repress it over and over again until we set up a system that will, when the ball goes down into this area down here, we'll set it so that our game manager then becomes our game active becomes false, and then we're able to press the button again one more time. So we'll see here now when we press play. So at the moment our game active is set to be false, and at any point we can hit the space bar, and now our game is playing away like that. But now if I hit the space bar, absolutely nothing happens because our game active is true, so therefore we can't make any changes to it. So perfect, that's exactly what we wanted to do, and now we can move on to our next stage of developing this game.
Konnichiwa.